before malls, DVD players, and the internet, downtown was not only Macon's shopping center and home theater, it was its chat room, too.
It was just an easygoing southern town where you walk by somebody and you'd say, "Hello, how are you today?" And first thing you knew, they was telling you their life story, or you was relating some of your experiences. And it was just a friendly, good place. It still is. But you just have to know where the people are.
Back in the 50s, everybody knew where the people were. Most any time of day, they'd be down at Ann Jet's restaurant, right on Mulberry. Ann Jet's was the place in Macon for lunch or simply to grab a cup of coffee and sit a spell. But it wasn't really the coffee or the collard greens that made Ann Jet so popular. It was the restaurant's vivacious proprietor, Ann Jet Lyles.
She was a very charismatic woman. She would come out during the meals and go from table to table, tell jokes, greet people.
Ann Jet's story seemed to start off promising enough. The youngest daughter of a Macon grocer, in 1947, Ann Jet married Ben Lyles. A young man fresh out of the Army, Ben's family owned a restaurant in downtown Macon. And when Ann Jet wasn't taking care of the couple's daughter, Marcia, she was down at the restaurant helping take care of the family business.
Early on, she realized that she had a knack for this, that she was very good with customers. I think she enjoyed the interchange.
It was a good thing, because Ben's health wasn't the best.
He had rheumatic fever real bad, and it would hit him, and he wouldn't go to work. The restaurant was just going downhill.
In January 1952, a few months after their second daughter, Carla, was born, Ben's condition took a turn for the worse. He was admitted to Macon's Parkview Hospital, tormented by abdominal pain, severe nosebleeds, and swollen extremities.
No one could figure out what was wrong with Ben. The doctors, I think, finally decided it was encephalitis, but I think that was almost a compromised kind of diagnosis. Nobody ever knew for sure.
2 days later, Ben was dead. Ann Jet, only 25, was suddenly a widow with 2 small children to raise, and she rose to the challenge.
She just felt like that she was somebody, and that she was going to make a name for herself.
Renamed Ann Jet's in 1955, the restaurant's new manager and namesake was a big hit with the 1 o'clock club, courthouse regulars that ate there most every day. In 1955, Ann Jet's glamorous silver-haired looks attracted the attention of Buddy Gabbard, an airline pilot.
When the pilots would come to town, they often would eat at Ann Jet's restaurant, again because it was a popular place to be. And that's where she met Buddy, who I think must have fallen in love with her almost immediately. The first night they met, Ann Jet says that when he paid his bill, he told her he was going to marry her.
And after a whirlwind romance, he did. Ann Jet's happiness was short-lived. In November, after a minor operation at Parkview Hospital, Buddy became seriously ill. On December 2nd, he died. The whole town's heart went out to the young widow.
Everyone thought how tragic Ann Jet's life had become.
Ann Jet wasn't totally alone. Julia Lyles, her former mother-in-law, continued to lend a hand. Julia was such a part of the family that in 1957, when Ann Jet bought a house on Pinewood Drive in North Macon, her former mother-in-law moved in. However, the bad luck that dogged Ann Jet was never far behind. Julia Lyles passed away at the end of September after more than a month of agony. Around town, people shook their heads and said a prayer for poor Ann Jet. She buried 2 husbands and a mother-in-law. Her 2 babies were all that she had left in the world. for the time being at least. It was about an hour before closing time on the evening of March 1st, 1958, when Marcia fell ill.
She was in good health. And then all of a sudden she started getting sick. Next thing you know, she's in the hospital.
In April 1958, all of Macon knew that Marcia Lyle's dear departed soul had joined those of Ben Lyles, Buddy Gabbard, and Julia Lyles. But what Macon didn't know just yet was that bits of Marcia's lungs, liver, and kidneys, as well as the lock of her hair, were in the custody of the Georgia State Crime Lab. Back in March, during the second week of Marcia's illness, her paternal aunt received two mysterious letters. Both read simply, "Please come at once. She's getting the same dose as the others." There was no signature. Marcia's aunt took the letters straight to the sheriff's office.
We sat and talked with her, and she told us what she suspicioned, when she felt like this niece was being poisoned.
The medical examiner remembered the letter, and so he, rather than just doing the usual kind of visual post-mortem, he went to the funeral home where the body had already been taken and conducted an autopsy there after midnight one night.
The samples, sealed in pint mason jars, were sent off to the crime lab in Atlanta. The test came back positive for arsenic.
Arsenic's the easiest thing to find. The poison they use, arsenic, does not dissipate. It will end up in your hair and in your fingernails.
The medical examiner decided to ask Anjette some questions. And when Anjette came to his office with Carla in tow, it was the medical examiner that was in for a shock.
She brought Carla, her 7-year-old daughter, with her. She stood Carla up on the examining table and said, "Now you tell the doctor what you told me."
Carla described how, before Marcia got sick, the two girls had played hospital with the Jones twins, kids from the neighborhood. The children had pretended to be doctors and patients, and even gave one another medicine. At that point, Anjette produced the medicine from her purse, the bottle of taro ant poison. The authorities, however, weren't about to dismiss Marcia's death as child's play. They got a court order to have the bodies of Buddy Gabbard and Ben and Julia Lyles exhumed. The 3 new autopsies came back positive for arsenic. The really amazing thing was that it took an anonymous tip before the authorities figured it out.
If you're looking for arsenic, you can find it, but if you're not looking for it, you'll find a lot of other things.
On May 6, 1958, the Bibb County Sheriffs arrested Anjette on 4 counts of murder. Deputies searched her house on Pinewood Drive. They found 2 bottles of taro ant poison hidden in Anjette's closet. They also found all sorts of voodoo paraphernalia, candles in various colors, powders, oils, and charms.
A lot of this voodoo type stuff, she believed in that stuff. She would light these candles. A black candle meant death, and different candles meant different things.
In a deep South town like Macon, voodoo wasn't unknown. It wasn't, however, something white women in the suburbs dabbled in, except for Anjette. She told investigators that for spiritual help, she made regular trips to the shotgun shacks around the old cotton mill.
Today they say spiritual advisors. In the old days they said palm readers and then fortune tellers. But she was going to a person for guidance.
She wanted the good life, and the good life to her was flashy automobiles, flashy dress, and parties at night.
She had insurance on her mother-in-law. She had insurance on her child. She had insurance on her husband that she killed, and her first husband that she had also killed, Lyles.
And what about the big mystery, the person who sent the mysterious letters? Who was Marcia Lyle's guardian angel? A cook at the restaurant, she had noticed Anjette doing some strange things while Julia and Marcia were ill. And it had to do with the food Anjette took to the hospital.
Before she left the restaurant, She took a brown paper bag, tucked it under her arm, took a spoon, walked into the bathroom, closed the door behind her, came out a few minutes later stirring the buttermilk.
So why didn't you go to the sheriff? The cook, like all the cooks at Anjet's, was black.
This was Macon, and this was the 1950s. And she knew that if she went to the sheriff, that not only would she probably not be believed, going to cast suspicion on a white employer, but she also ran the risk of losing her job. And jobs weren't that easy to come by.
The judge, based on the premeditated nature of the killings, sentenced Anjet to death in the electric chair. Only it wasn't exactly what happened. Sentencing Anjet to death and actually executing her were two very different things, especially in 1950s Georgia.
There had been, as I understand it, a woman executed in Georgia. I don't know exactly when, but some years earlier, I'm sure, and I understood it was a black woman. And so to put a woman, particularly a white woman, into the electric chair was tough.
So tough that the governor backed down. Mere weeks before Anjet was scheduled to die, he appointed a special sanity commission who ruled Anjet was insane. On October 17, 1959, Anjet was admitted to Central State Mental Hospital in Milledgeville. Until her death in 1977, she worked, believe it or not, in the ward kitchen.
I thought it was just the strangest thing in the world. And of course, if they kept the taro ant poison away from her, I guess it was all right.
And in a small way, Anjet Lyles has earned her own place in the folklore that draws visitors to downtown. For years, the old restaurant, since demolished, was a stop on Macon's downtown tour.
I would say over on the right is the famous Anjet Lyles restaurant. It was a favorite place to eat until they discovered that murder was on the menu.